I remember that moment as if it happened yesterday. David, with a faint smirk, poured more wine into his glass, before casually dropping the words that cut through me like a blade. "Just don't show up at the airport. You're not part of this anymore." No one reacted. My mother nodded gently, as if he were merely stating a long-accepted truth. My sister Lydia didn't look up from her phone, still engrossed in showing Mom pictures of the new bikini she planned to wear in Amalfi. My father, always silent but observant, with his judging eyes, raised an eyebrow slightly, before steering the conversation toward gelato flavors in Rome. I sat still. One hand under the table clutched the napkin tightly. The other lifted my wine glass as if I were at a fancy gala. I gave a faint smile, not a tremor in my expression. "Got it," I said. 2 words. Calm. No trace of sadness or anger. Then I lightly clinked my glass against David's, the man who had just excluded me from the trip I had planned and paid for entirely. "I'm Elena, 38, a strategy director at a tech company based in Seattle. 4 weeks ago, I received a promotion most people would dream of. Double the salary, a private office overlooking the lake, and an international priority travel card. I kept the news to myself for a while, not out of humility, but because I wanted to share it in the most special way. My family, David, Lydia, Mom, Dad, has always been a complicated part of my life. We're not broken, but we're not particularly close either. Our bond exists in holiday dinners, occasional calls, timely texts, and reluctant hugs. I've always been the balancer, the one in the middle, the one who doesn't stir trouble or make things difficult. The daughter, the sister, the sibling, always ready to step back to keep the peace. And this time I thought I'd be the one to bring joy. I spent nights planning that trip, scrolling through hundreds of websites to find a Florence hotel with a balcony overlooking an ancient cathedral, a canal-side restaurant in Venice, serving handmade pasta, booking first-class flights, so Mom with her chronic back pain could recline comfortably during the 10-hour flight. I pictured their surprised looks, tears of gratitude, bursts of laughter when I handed them the printed tickets and itinerary. Maybe Mom would say something like, "Elena, I'm so proud of you." David might stay silent, but I believed his gaze would soften. And Lydia, despite her usual fussiness, might hug me tightly and exclaim, "You're crazy, but I love you." But all I got was distant coldness and exclusion. David, the man I covered 6 months of rent for when he was unemployed last year, now sat across from me sipping wine from the bottle I brought, telling me I shouldn't be on that trip. Lydia, the one still using my secondary card for her monthly spending, only cared about showing off dresses and asking if she could bring her friend Mia. Mom, the woman I rushed to the ER in the middle of the night, the one I send money to monthly for her medications, just nodded, unsurprised, unopposed, as if she'd known all along. I wasn't invited. I thought I was waiting for something else. Recognition. A squeeze of the hand, a hug, or even a grateful glance. Nothing. That dinner ended like a tired family meeting, with everyone slipping into their chosen roles and scripts. I sat in the role of the invisible outsider officially for the first time. Driving home, I didn't play music. Seattle was lightly rainy that night. The droplets streaked down the windshield, mirroring the heaviness in my chest. I didn't cry. I wouldn't let myself cry. Tears might come later, if at all, but for now, I felt only a vast emptiness inside. It had no name. Not anger. Not quite pain. Just a shattering realization that maybe I was never truly part of the family I'd poured my heart into holding together. I got home at 11 p.m. The desk lamp cast its usual glow on the walls. I poured myself a glass of wine, sat at my desk, and opened my laptop. My inbox still held the confirmation emails for flight bookings, hotel invoices, airport transfers, and a full tour itinerary. Every detail was perfect, every number meticulously planned, like everything I'd ever done in life. I began canceling them one by one. Flights click, hotels click, car services click. It took about 20 minutes. Swift, clean, no hesitation. Like scrapping a project that didn't meet KPIs. I sat there staring at the blank screen, my heart undisturbed. A small part of me still hoped someone, Mom, Lydia, or David, would text me. "Elena, do you still have your ticket? Come with us, okay? Even if it was just for show." But no. They kept laughing in the group chat, discussing what to wear when landing in Rome, debating cash versus cards, not a single mention of me. They truly saw me as a walking wallet, and now that wallet wasn't flying with them anymore. When I turned off the bedside lamp that night, something in me switched off too. Not love, not hope, but the belief that kindness alone could create connection. A week later, at Seattle-Tacoma International Airport, David, Lydia, and my parents, dressed impeccably for travel with shiny new suitcases, were denied check-in because the tickets didn't exist. The group stood bewildered at the counter, causing a scene amid the crowd of travelers. Phones lit up, angry voices clashed. I knew because I watched it all from afar through the airline app I'd linked when booking. At 10:12 a.m., my phone buzzed. Lydia's first text. "Fix this now." I set the phone down, finished my cold coffee, and gave the faintest smile. Because the real story was just beginning. I don't know how long I sat motionless in that chair. The room was dark, save for the desk lamp's glow in one corner. The glass of wine I poured after dinner sat untouched on the table. What bothered me most wasn't David's words, though they were blunt and vicious, but the silence of everyone else. No one stood up for me. No one was surprised when I was cut out of a plan I'd created. The feeling of being treated as surplus, not because I'd done wrong, but because others deemed me unnecessary, wasn't like a wound. It was like slipping and falling into a void, where no one bothered to pull me back up. I opened my laptop. The screen blazed to life, the airline's logo glaringly clear. The flight confirmation emails were still there. Florence, Venice, Rome. I'd booked first-class tickets for all four: Dad, Mom, David, Lydia. My name wasn't on them. I wanted this to be a pure gift, a surprise, a way to bond without claiming credit. I was so naive. Every person in that family had leaned on me at some point. Lydia couldn't afford college tuition I paid for her last 3 years. Not once, but consistently. She never said thank you. David was evicted from his old apartment for missing 2 months' rent. I settled his debt and co-signed his new lease so he could stay without a credit check. The SUV Mom drives, I'm the one who bought it. She said the bank rejected her loan because of Dad's old unpaid debt. I signed for it without hesitation. I did it all not expecting repayment. I did it because I thought, that's what family does when they can. And I could. But that night, the night David declared I no longer belonged to them, woke me from my delusion. They never saw me as a person. Only as what I could provide. I opened the first tab international airline. Logged in. Selected manage bookings. Clicked each reservation code. Cancel. Confirm. Cancel. Confirm. No hesitation. No trembling hands. Just silence, like someone tidying a drawer, tossing out what's no longer needed. Next, the hotels. I'd booked separate rooms in 3 cities, 2 nights each. Breakfast included airport transfers arranged. Cancel. Confirm. Shuttle services canceled. Vatican tour canceled. Uffizi Museum tickets canceled. Total time 23 minutes. When I shut down the laptop, the apartment fell silent. Outside the window, Seattle's streetlights reflected off the glass. I felt there was nothing left to think about. Not because I'd chosen revenge, but because I no longer needed to play that worn-out role. I slept deeply that night. The next morning, the family group chat was still lively. Lydia sent a photo of a new white dress. Mom asked whether to exchange euros at the airport or beforehand. David shared a list of must-try Italian dishes. No one mentioned me. No one asked if I was coming, as if I'd never been part of their story. I watched them with the stillness of a spectator in the back row, no longer sad, just empty. 3 days passed. No one suspected. Then came Saturday morning, their travel day. I woke earlier than usual, poured myself coffee, and opened the airline app. I still had access to the booking details as the original purchaser. 7:42 a.m. status not checked in. 8:10 a.m. status passengers at counter. 8:19 a.m. Notification check-in failed, no valid tickets found. 8:20 a.m. Lydia posted an airport selfie on Instagram with the caption "Ciao Italy," followed by a plain emoji and a smiley face. 8:25 a.m. First text from Lydia Elena. "Where's my ticket? What the hell is going on?" I didn't respond. 8:26 a.m. Next text from Mom. "What did you do?" "We're being denied boarding." 8:27 a.m. David called. I let it ring, then silenced it. 8:28 a.m. Lydia again. "Fix this now. I've booked hair nails in a separate hotel for me and Mia." I'm not joking. I set the phone on the table untouched. I opened the window. The April morning air was crisp, carrying a faint scent of cherry blossoms. I stood there watching Seattle wake up and felt, for the first time in years outside of it all, no more running to put out fires, no more opening my wallet to patch emotional gaps. Just a 38-year-old woman, independent, clear-headed, learning not to be defined by unconditional sacrifice. That afternoon, the texts kept coming. David cursed, Mom called my name in anger, Lydia blamed and sobbed. I didn't block them, but I didn't reply either. I let them experience what I'd lived with for too many years, the feeling of being abandoned in silence. By nightfall, the group chat was still active, but cracks began to show. My father, usually silent, wrote for the first time, "This has gone too far," and said nothing more. I saw it clearly, not because they cared about me, but because they were scared. Scared of losing what they'd grown accustomed to. I didn't gloat. I didn't revel. I just felt relieved. When I turned off the light to sleep that night, I knew their dream trip was gone. And I, the one who tried to play the good sister, the dutiful daughter, was gone too. The next morning, Lydia texted, "I can't believe you did this over one dinner." One comment, "What's wrong with you?" I scrolled past. No response. I opened a new document on my computer titled Shared Assets to Review. I was done being the financier, and they were no longer the only audience I wanted to keep. I didn't expect they could go so far, but the worst part wasn't what they did behind my back. It was that I once thought they couldn't. 2 days after their airport rejection, I got a call from my company's HR department. The representative's voice was gentle but serious. She asked if I had a few minutes to discuss an anonymous complaint submitted through the internal portal. I nodded, though my throat suddenly felt dry. The complainant, she said, alleges you used company funds to finance a family trip to Italy, including falsifying travel expenses, creating fake invoices, and misusing corporate budgets for personal gain. The room went still for a moment. I heard my heartbeat in my chest. I asked if she could forward the email, and minutes later I opened my inbox with a slightly trembling hand. The anonymous email attached forged documents, invoice screenshots, internal memos, even a memo from the VP confirming the Italy trip as part of a new strategic executive program. The problem was, it was all fake. The VP's name was misspelled. The logo was misaligned. The language was unprofessional, but it was crafted with just enough precision to make an uninformed person suspicious. I took a deep breath. Staring at the fabricated files, I didn't need anyone to tell me this wasn't a stranger's prank. This was retaliation from the people who once called me family. I didn't react immediately. HR said they'd review the records. I thanked them for the heads up. They added that at first glance it didn't seem convincing, but protocol required investigation. I sat there for a long while. Not panicking, but because something in me had quietly fractured. No anger or shock. Just a clarity like fluorescent light exposing dust in a room I'd thought was clean. That afternoon, my doorbell rang. The security screen showed a woman I'd only met briefly at Lydia's house. Clara, the nanny for my niece. I opened the door. Clara stood there, a sleeping boy in her arms, a canvas bag slung over her shoulder. She looked tired, but resolute. "I'm sorry for coming unannounced," she whispered. "But I thought, you should know this before they hide it." She opened her bag and handed me a USB drive. I didn't mean to get involved, but I saw. I heard. And I don't think you deserve this. I invited her in, but she shook her head. "I quit this morning. I can't stay there anymore." I held the USB, watching her step into the elevator. The boy in her arms stirred, then slept on. I stood frozen. That night, I plugged the USB into my laptop. There was a folder named For Elena. Inside were audio clips trimmed, labeled by date and time. I opened the first one. Lydia's voice came through clearly. "Just scare her, that's enough. She's such a pushover. Mom, say a few words and I'll spice it up. She'll cough up the money." Another clip, Mom's voice cutting in. "Don't worry. If she gets mad, she'll get over it in a few months. She's never fought back her whole life." Then another. "Honestly, I think this Italy thing is fair. Consider it a reward for putting up with her holier-than-thou attitude all these years." I sat there, hands clenched but lips pressed, silent. I moved to the second folder, screenshots of group chats between Mom, Lydia, David, ones I was never added to. Jokes about mining Big Sis, candid photos of my house with captions like, "This is where we pay tuition." One final file, a draft email intended for my company, accusing me of harassment and discrimination within the workplace. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the ceiling. The truth was no longer something I doubted. It was right here, raw, big enough to destroy any relationship. But what unsettled me most was I wasn't shocked. Not anymore. I didn't text back, didn't call anyone. I sent one line to the family group chat. "I know everything. Good luck." 3 minutes later, Lydia replied, "What?" I didn't respond. Instead, I opened my banking app, stopped the automatic transfers to Mom, canceled Lydia's access to the secondary card, reviewed David's lease agreement, and emailed the landlord that I'd remove my name from the contract in 30 days. I called the car dealership registered under my name and requested the SUV parked at my parents' house be repossessed. I did each task carefully, without anger, without trembling. I severed every tie like someone unfastening chain links from their wrists after too long bound by what's called family duty. That night no one called. The group chat went silent. I understood, not because they regretted, but because they were scared. Scared that this time I'd truly changed. And I had. The next morning, HR called back. They confirmed the complaints were baseless. I hadn't used any company funds for personal gain. All submitted documents were legitimate. The case would be closed. I thanked them. My voice was calm, but inside a faint crack sounded, like the final link breaking. I stood up from my chair, opened the window. The morning breeze carried the scent of grass and the hum of city traffic. I knew I'd crossed a threshold, one that once passed offered no return. My family had chosen to cut me from their circle, and I'd just dropped the last key from my hand. Some silences aren't frightening, and some, like the calm before a storm, make it hard to breathe. A month after my "I know everything" good luck message, my phone stopped buzzing at night. The family group chat grew sporadic. No more torrents of blame, no late-night missed calls, no proper apologies either. Just the quiet drift of a relationship rotting day by day. I still woke early, still walked the neighborhood every Sunday morning, still worked steadily. I learned to eat alone without feeling empty, to buy fresh flowers for no reason, and for the first time to reread books I'd bought and forgotten years ago. But the quiet didn't last. On the second day of the 5th week, I got an email from Lydia. Subject sis. It wasn't long. She wrote that she was sad, that she didn't think I'd react so strongly over one comment, that I'd put the family in a tough spot, that Mom's really upset, that my kid keeps asking why she can't see Aunt Elena, and finally, a line like a blade wrapped in velvet. Can you talk properly instead of this silent treatment? I read it, then closed it. No reply. 2 days later, a handwritten letter appeared in my mailbox. Blue ink, Mom's handwriting. Elegant, neat, like everything she did. Dear daughter, I know you're angry. I know you're hurt. But family isn't something you abandon over fleeting emotions. I didn't think things would go this far. Maybe I was wrong for not speaking up that day. But you shouldn't hold a grudge so long. You've always been the one who overthinks. If you need time, I'll give you space. But cutting everything off like this isn't the way. You'll regret it. Trust me. I reread the last line. You'll regret it. I set the letter on the table, folded it neatly, and slipped it into an unlocked drawer. I wasn't angry at Mom, but I couldn't pretend what happened was a minor misunderstanding. It wasn't. And her calling it a small thing only made it clearer we didn't live on the same emotional plane. Dad was different. He didn't write, didn't call, left no trace on any platform, as if by not seeing or hearing it never happened. Like he'd always lived silent when the house cracked. Silent when I fell silent, when Mom cried, when David yelled, when Lydia caused chaos. That very masculine, very weak kind of silence. I used to be sad. Now I'm not. I accepted it. Some people, even those who share your name, never have the courage to face the truth. I thought I'd grown used to that silence until one evening at 9 p.m. when there was a knock at my door. Not urgent, not rushed. Slow, steady light, like an apology. I checked the security peephole. It was David. He stood there carrying nothing but a worn jacket, a small backpack, and an envelope in hand. His eyes lacked their usual arrogance, just fatigue and resignation. I didn't open the door. I stood still, watched him place the envelope on the doorstep, nod slightly at the camera, and walk away. I didn't cry, but my heart raced. Later, after his figure disappeared around the street corner, I opened the door and picked up the envelope. It was light brief. Elena, I don't know where to start. Maybe I don't need to ramble. I was wrong. Not just about Italy, but in how I've treated you all these years. I used to think I was left behind, and I blamed you for your success. I was jealous, envious, cowardly. But I realized because you turned away. Thank you for cutting me off. It made me see how long I'd been leaning on you. I'm jobless now, evicted with no clear plan. But for the first time I feel I need to stand on my own, without anyone. Even you. I wish you a lighter life. I owe you a thank you. David. I folded the letter, set it on the table. For the first time in weeks, I sat silently for nearly an hour doing nothing. Thinking nothing. I didn't open my wallet right away. I didn't call him. I didn't apologize. But the next evening I transferred a small amount to his old account, The one I'd frozen a month ago. Not much. Enough for a month's rent. Enough to breathe. No confirmation text. No thank you. And I didn't expect one. Because David at least had truly understood. I felt lighter. Not from forgiveness, but because one person in my family took responsibility. No blame. No threats. No evasion. Just a silent admission I was wrong. I didn't have high hopes, but that small kindness let me believe I wasn't crazy for once trusting in something better. The days after no one else knocked. No letters. No emails. I learned to drink afternoon tea without a lump in my throat. The scent of jasmine tea, soft French music, and a silence unburdened by anyone's shadow. I reorganized my filing cabinet closed, old accounts, updated ownership details for joint investments I'd opened with Mom. Each action was steady like punctuation marks, closing an old paragraph I no longer wished to reread. Family was no longer where I turned when I felt weak. It was something I learned to accept they wouldn't change. But I could. I realized I'd entered a new phase when, on the first morning of the 3rd month, I woke without an invisible weight on my chest. Sunlight filtered through the curtains, touching the wooden table where I kept my teacup and brown leather notebook. Something was different. Not quite relief, but peace. As if the noise outside the blame, the crocodile tears, the anger had finally closed behind a door. I started with the smallest things. I removed each family photo from its frame. Me and Lydia in high school Christmas with Mom and Dad one year. David and me beside the car I'd put the down payment on. I didn't tear or burn them, just wrapped them carefully, placed them in a paper box, and set it on the highest shelf in my closet. Far enough not to see daily, but close enough to know they're there if I ever want to face them again. In their place, I hung a photo of myself alone in Lisbon's square, wind blowing my dress and hair, smiling without looking at the camera. Another of a snowy night in Kyoto, sipping matcha under an awning. And one more me with college friends when none of us had anything but youth and kindness. I realized I'd lived a life with plenty of light, only I'd let darkness overshadow it too long. I opened a new Excel sheet titled, Personal Budget Starting This Month. No more entries for Mom's support, Lydia's allowance, David's rent. I replaced them with Solo Travel 2025 Book Fund Baking Class. I relearned to spend money on myself. Not to atone, to keep people, or to fill voids. One rainy afternoon, I picked up an old journal abandoned since 2019. The last page held rushed handwriting I want one day for the whole family to go somewhere together. I smiled faintly. Some wishes aren't wrong, just meant for the wrong people. I started writing again. Not to vent, but to remind myself where I'm heading. July 6th, cooked for the first time in nearly 3 weeks instead of ordering in. The pasta looked pretty sad, but I felt full and enough eating alone. July 10th, bought tickets for next month's book fair. Signed up for a short story workshop. Not sure if I'll manage, but I'm excited. July 14th, met Emily, college friend, at a cafe. She said she heard from a mutual that Elena's family says she let money ruin everything. I didn't say anything. Just sipped my tea. Not sad, just familiar. I stopped flinching when someone mentioned family. I didn't need to prepare excuses for my silence. I didn't feel the need to justify, because truth sometimes doesn't need defending. It just needs to live. A week later, I heard an old song in a bookstore one Mom used to play every evening. I stood still for a moment. No tears, but my heart skipped a beat. I might never hear that song without thinking of her, but memories, good or bad, should be luggage, not chains. I started exercising again. Gently walks, morning yoga shoulder stretches after long work hours. Each step out of the house was a step away from last month's me. One afternoon, I stopped by the small bookstore down the street. The owner, an elderly man with curly white hair, recognized me from a book fair years ago. We chatted briefly. He said no one's ever truly alone if they still listen to themselves. I nodded, no need to add more. That night, I wrote in my journal, some pains don't need to be undone. They just need to be set down. Then you move on. Occasionally, messages came from old acquaintances tied to family, like, your mom said you're going off-grid, or Lydia said you overreacted, right? I read. Then deleted. I wasn't angry at them. But I didn't need them either. I'd lived too long in a cycle, trying to be good enough to be loved, quiet enough not to be hated, useful enough not to be left behind. Now, letting go, I saw I'd lost nothing. Just burdens. One late evening while typing final emails before bed, I got a text from an unknown number. I heard you're doing better. I'm glad, though I've no right to be. David. I didn't reply. But I knew among those who'd turned away at least one was learning to stand tall again. I lit a scented candle, played classical music, brewed a cup of hot cocoa. I sat there doing nothing, thinking nothing, just feeling. The silence this time didn't come from distance with others. It came from finally being close to myself. 6 months passed. No midnight texts, no urgent emails, no 2 a.m. missed calls. With Mom, fell callback now. No one banging on my door, no tears in the hallway, no apologies too late to be sincere. Everything, it seemed, had settled into the distance it should have always had. I still lived in the same apartment, same street, same corner cafe where the barista knew my cappuccino order, but something had changed. Not the place, but inside me. I woke earlier. Not for work, but to savor mornings I'd once overlooked in endless exhaustion. I walked around the lake near my house, listened to birds, watched elderly folks exercise, kids ride brakeless bikes. I breathed evenly. No more heaviness in my chest like earlier this year when everything felt like screaming in a storm I couldn't control. Once I stepped into the old bookstore and rediscovered a book I loved in college, The Art of Solitude. I read a few pages, then bought it as a gift to myself. That night, I read until dawn. One passage made me close the book, lean back. Silence isn't the absence of noise. It's when your inner voice stops begging to be heard. I used to be that person living as if I had to prove I deserved to stay in others' hearts. But now, I didn't need that anymore. I opened my laptop, created a new file, Conditional Kinship, a personal essay. The title appeared bold, unadorned. I typed each line like picking up fragments of my past. I once thought love meant giving without expecting return. That family was the one place without conditions. But reality is some places called family only let you stay as long as you're useful. I didn't write with anger. I wrote with truth. Over the months, I heard things from old friends that Mom said Elena changed because of money. That Lydia claimed she let work and success ruin everything. That David stayed silent, didn't justify, didn't defend, but didn't add fuel either. I wasn't surprised. Everyone tells the story they can live with best. I didn't argue. No need to. I learned that sometimes silence isn't because you have nothing to say, but because you have nothing left to prove. One midweek afternoon while editing my essay draft, I saw a new email. Sender Lydia. Subject, it's still me. I stared at it in my inbox. Didn't open, didn't delete. Maybe it held an apology. Perhaps the usual vague excuses. Or possibly a final attempt to pull me back to my old role, the forgiver. The continuer. I let the email sit. Like a door I didn't need to open to know what's inside. I returned to my document, typing the closing line for my essay. Family was once where I sacrificed to exist. Now it's where I don't need to exist to be loved. I reread it several times. No edits, no additions. Then I saved the file closed. The laptop stood up and stepped onto the balcony. The breeze picked up. Pale, golden sunlight bathed the street. I stood there, hands in my coat pockets, thinking of those I once called kin. I didn't hate them, but I didn't love them the old way anymore. Maybe one day I'll open Lydia's email. Maybe not. But if I do, it won't be because I'm soft-hearted, but because I'm strong enough not to be knocked down again. I've forgiven, but I haven't forgotten. And that's the greatest freedom I've ever known. I don't know what the future holds. There may be moments of weakness, days when an old memory stings. But I also know that if I could stand after all this, I can go much further. Because in the end I learned this peace doesn't come from everyone loving you. It comes from not losing yourself to be loved. My story, perhaps, is the story of many. It's not about revenge, but about reclaiming self-worth after years of silent sacrifice. I once thought love meant enduring, that giving was enough to be kept. But now I know kindness shouldn't trap you in a place that no longer respects you. Family isn't always a safe haven, but if you're brave enough to step out, you can find another family yourself, and those who don't demand your pain to stay. And if you're at the edge of a decision, remember, cutting ties isn't an end. Sometimes it's a beginning. Thank you for staying with me to these final lines. If this story touched you in some way, please share your thoughts below. Don't forget to follow the channel for more emotional journeys, where we don't just tell stories, but heal together.